Hello and good evening, everybody. And thank you very much, Nico, for those words of welcome. And what I'm going to try and do this evening is talk about coaching and executive coaching and try and pull together some of our thinking and talking about coaching and executive coaching. And one of the things that I'm going to try to do, if I can just make my screen play nicely with me, is share my screen. Yeah, I know everybody laughs when I say that, and I can't make my screen share work just at the moment, so I'll carry on talking for a moment while I try and work out why that is not working.
We can currently see your screen now, Roger.
Oh,
so
you
if
can?
you just go back to the PowerPoint, you should be able to flick through.
Lovely, thank you, Isaac. That's the voice of sanity helping me out. So you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Lovely, that's good. That explains why I couldn't share it, because I already was sharing it. So coaching, I've been coaching for 25 years and more, and I've been teaching people about coaching for 25 years or more as well. So one of the things about coaching and how it links to what Alexander was just talking about is that I try to encourage people to coach from a place of authenticity, so that when we're coaching, we are coaching in a way that is authentic and emotionally intelligent. So when I'm working with leaders about how to be good leaders, I'm often talking about authenticity and emotional intelligence. When I'm talking to coaches about how to coach and talking to leaders about how to coach, I'm talking about exactly the same things. When we coach, we need to be authentic and we need to be emotionally intelligent as well. So as we start this exploration this evening, I want to start with a piece of what we call appreciative inquiry. So appreciative inquiry is where we start off by thinking about something in as positive a way as we can. And I'd like everybody to join in with this, please, regardless of your status on this call. Please, would you use the chat function to answer the following two questions? Tell me who in your working life has most helped you to develop your talent. It doesn't need to be a name. My line manager, my first big boss, one of my clients, somebody who was head of another department. But think about who in your working life has most helped you to develop your talent, and give me some idea of who that was by just putting your answer in the chat for me. And then also add a line that tells me, what did they do to help your development? And Isaac, who you just heard rescue me from the abyss of my own ignorance about whether or not I was sharing my screen, Isaac is going to give me some idea of what turns up in the chat just by reading out some of the things that go into the chat for me. So let's hear, Isaac, when you get some response, who in our working lives has most helped us to develop our talent, and what did they do to help our development? Just tell me what kind of things pop up in the chat.
So we've got a couple so far. We've got a long-time friend. We've got a cousin, a first boss, an editor of a magazine, and just waiting for a couple more to come in. And then I imagine they'll explain about the development soon.
So the first thing to say is that somebody who is going to have a really great influence over you and help you to develop, somebody who is going to be a positive coach, can come from any one of a variety of different sources. It could be a friend, a colleague, it can be a relative, it could be somebody who has a role of importance in where you work.
We've
Coaches,
got
go ahead, Isaac. Yep. Go ahead.
I was going to say we've got a third boss, a grandfather. That is pretty much it. And we've got a couple of explanations as well. So
yeah, go ahead with the explanations.
So I believe for the longtime friend, spoke honestly, without fear or favor, and for the first boss, the editor of a magazine, through an article I wrote back at me repeatedly until he could understand it. So I think it's slow development, slowly but surely finding the right path with that one. And then the cousin one, that was myself. So I'll just say she's inspired me to stand up for myself for the first time and actually discuss openly and honestly with my bosses and have a dialogue with people higher up than me. And that was that's how I was developed.
Okay. So again, what you hear in this appreciative inquiry is coaching can come from a number of different sources, formal and informal. And how people help your development is not by telling you what to do. It's by holding a space in which you can feel safe to learn and to develop and to grow for yourself. Coaching is empowering. It's not telling people what to do. And great coaching does all those things that we've just heard from Isaac telling us what's gone into the chat there. It can be a tremendously powerful thing that happens in your life. So thinking about, because tonight we're going to be mostly talking about coaching at work, executive coaching as we call it. So coaching, we talk about life coaching, which predominantly happens away from work. Executive coaching predominantly happens at work. How do great managers develop talent? One of the things that they do is they constantly observe people. So if you're going to be a manager who coaches, you must constantly be watching the people who are under your guidance, who are under your leadership, constantly observing them, constantly looking at what they do, and constantly thinking about succession planning. Who is going to take my job from me? Who is going to be ready to do what I do? And managers who don't have the confidence to prepare people to take over from them will never succeed themselves. Because until you prepare people to do what you can do, other people won't be prepared to move you on. So thinking about succession and succession planning is what managers who coach do really well, which also means that they delegate opportunities to learn. They're not afraid to give people opportunities to learn. They don't see that as threatening themselves.
I have a question, Roger. May I
Yeah,
interrupt?
Nico, yeah, go ahead.
So as a manager and someone who has been shaping and working lots of people and trying to deliver results at the same time, it can be pretty challenging because, as you said earlier, coaches are supposed to observe and they're not supposed to interfere and say. But how do we then develop the talent by explaining people? What if people do not have maybe at that point of time a capacity or a knowledge to do what needs to be done, and they might be struggling with execution? So to which extent are we supposed to just observe and support? How do you overcome that?
Well,
do you understand my question?
I do understand your question completely. Don't forget that coaching is not the only weapon in your armory as a manager. Managing is also available to you as a weapon in your armory. So think about this for a moment. You have somebody who's working for you who isn't really sure about how to do the job that they're doing. They are unable to contribute because they don't know how to do the job. You as a manager need to tell them how to do it. That's not a coaching opportunity, that's a managing opportunity. You manage them and you help them and you tell them what to do. Because until they know how to do the job, they're very little use to you. So in that situation, the skill that you call upon as a leader is not the skill of coaching. It's the skill of managing. It's managing somebody by saying to them, let me help you understand how to do this so that you are able to do it. When you're able to do it, then I can coach you about other things. But coaching is only one thing that leaders do, and it isn't always the right tool to use. So if somebody needs to be managed, manage them. If they need to be coached, coach them. Does that help you?
Yes, that clarifies it. I actually think that it puts it into the perspective that as a leader, it will be desirable to have all of those qualities and skills, right?
Absolutely.
To be able to know when to use management skills and the knowledge, when to use coaching, and when to, maybe fearless leadership.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it points it out perfectly that we have to be able to decide when to apply which skill in which situation and with whom, right?
Yes.
And that is a great explanation, very helpful. Thank you.
So you also need, in order to be able to coach people, to know what motivates everybody in your team. Because if I'm going to coach somebody, I need to be able to understand what their ambitions are, what motivates them, because then I can understand what they are likely to bring into the coaching environment with me. So what do I take away from this? If I want to be a coach, I have to spend a lot of time getting to know my people. It doesn't prevent me managing them. Coaching is an additional skill to managing. Coaching is something managers do. Managing is also something managers do. If the job requires you to manage the person. If it requires you to coach the person. How does coaching develop talent? Here's a quote from Peter Hawkins, who's the president of the Association of Professional Executive Coaching and Supervision, i.e. he's a great big grown-up coach. He says, a coaching culture exists in an organization when a coaching approach is a key aspect of how the leaders and staff engage and develop all their people and encourage their stakeholders in ways that create increased individual, team, and organizational performance and shared value for all stakeholders. Now, what's important about this is, for a while, people in business thought, oh, coaching's touchy-feely, it's cuddly, it's tree-huggy, it's beard and sandals. And what Peter Hawkins is saying is, no, it's not. Actually, coaching helps people perform better, and people who perform better create better value for stakeholders. So it's all about improving the bottom line in a people-orientated way rather than a product or a process-orientated way. But coaching is very much about a profit orientation. It's how do you improve your profit by improving your people. We know, for example, that in Western Europe, one of the huge problems in the workplace is that employees are not highly engaged. What we also know is that of employees in a strong coaching culture, 65% are highly engaged. That's against an average across Europe of highly engaged of around about 18 or 19%. So that's a huge differential that suggests that coaching is an activity which causes employees to become highly engaged. 80% of those who've received coaching report positive impacts in areas like work performance, communication skills, productivity, well-being, and business management strategies. So successful coaching cultures make sure their approach to coaching is proactive and strategic. This is not touchy-feely. This is about making business better.
But Roger, may I interrupt with the question?
Of course you can.
Because I am like our worst advocate, right? In order to steam it up. Do you think that basically coaching is a successful tool in leadership because it empowers the connection between people?
I think that one of the things that coaching helps to do is to create a culture where people feel more together, more joined up, more engaged, more cared for, and therefore more committed to what the team is trying to do.
But then, exactly. But then also, I guess, as a leader, we all have challenges, right? And I guess my question will be, but where is that kind of a fine line? Because yes, you do you are trying your best to engage with your team. You're trying to empower their talent. You're trying to listen and observe. You're trying to drive the change. But at the same time, as spoken, as a manager, you need to know when to manage and when to use the management skills. And then you need to also look into the profit and into the company's growth and the business growth. And sometimes I think what a lot of people experience, that culture of coaching can maybe be a little bit confusing, because maybe that togetherness also violates some management execution, or because in real life we all know that there are obstacles. Sometimes people can take you for granted because maybe you have been trying your best to support their talent, or maybe there is a lack of two-way understanding, because it is important as well for employees to understand you. Does that make sense? So I'm just trying to say that would you say there is a thin line, or how would we address that thin line between trying to empower a fully coaching environment, but at the same time make sure that we are productive and effective, and that we are driving the results and having these healthy relationships?
Well, we have to be clear right from the start with the team that coaching is something that we do to help people perform better. It's not remedial. We don't coach because people are doing something badly. We're coaching in order to encourage high performance, because we are trying to create high-performing individuals, and through that trying to create a high-performing team. And coaching is one of the things that we're trying to do, which is part of the overall intent to create a high-performing culture, and within that high-performing culture, create high-performing results. Now, there's all sorts of things that also have to happen, but if you are creating that kind of culture, coaching allows you to listen to people when they tell you how and where they are struggling and help them to work through that. It also, because of the engagement that it creates, makes it easier for you as a leader when you have to have difficult conversations with people where you are saying to them, I need to talk to you about where I think you need to pick things up, which isn't a coaching conversation, but the quality of the relationship you have because you have a coaching relationship elsewhere allows you to have that difficult conversation more easily. So coaching is one part of a mosaic of things that a leader does in order to create a high-performing team. So coaching is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end, and it's one of the strategies a leader will use to get to that end, which is a high-performing team creating high-performing results. Does that make sense?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, so what is coaching? What is coaching? And more importantly, what is not coaching? Looking at this 2x2 model, 4-box model, we've got two continua. On the vertical axis, we've got asking and telling, and on the horizontal axis, we've got a problem and a solution. So these are the things that coaches often work with. The problem to which we're trying to find a solution, and the degree to which we are asking and the degree to which we are telling. So to what we were talking about earlier on, if there is a problem and we are telling people what they need to do, i.e., you don't understand how to do this right, I am going to tell you how to do it right, you are directing and managing in that bottom left-hand box. It's a perfectly appropriate thing to do. It's a perfectly appropriate leader manager thing to do, but it isn't coaching. And as long as you understand it isn't coaching, if you see that that's what you need to do, because there is a problem that needs to be solved, maybe that problem is you are constantly late for meetings. I need to tell you that that's not acceptable behavior. That's not a coaching opportunity. That's a managing opportunity to correct somebody's poor behavior. Or maybe you're in the bottom right-hand corner. You want to move people to a solution and you want to tell them what that solution is. Now, we call this mentoring, not coaching. Now, mentoring is a different skill to coaching, and some people prefer to have mentors than coaches. The difference is a mentor will tell you the answer to the problem that you're trying to solve. A coach will not. Mentoring is absolutely fine. It is often a quicker thing to do than coaching. The problem with mentoring, if you are the individual's line manager, is that you quickly create a dependency, a dependent relationship, where the individual relies on you to constantly give them the solution when they have problems. So you're not actually doing them any good. You're simply creating a position where when they find themselves in difficulty, they look to you for a solution. And you've created that dependency in them because you are always keen to offer advice and offer solutions. So I would advise against doing that too often as a leader. If you're mentoring somebody who is not your direct report, that's a completely different sort of relationship. I mentor people, it's a different relationship. In the top left-hand corner, if you're asking people about a problem to help them clarify in order to then help them ask your counseling advice, you're clarifying and you're counseling. It isn't coaching, but it's very close to coaching because you're asking them to tell you about the problem. Coaching is when you are asking questions and you are getting them to solve the problem. So you are simply asking questions, they are solving the problem. When I work as an external coach and I'm asking people questions about a subject that I know nothing about, it's perfectly fine for them because they say, well, you don't know anything about this, so let me work this through with you. And it's easy for them to help me to coach them to a solution. But if I'm somebody's line manager, they find this quite a strange thing for me to do because they go, well, you know the solution, don't you? Why don't you just tell me what to do? Well, I don't want to tell you what to do. I want you to work it through for yourself. But what happens in a lot of coaching is the line manager goes, oh, all right, look, I'll tell you what I think you should do. And they fall into the trap of becoming an advisor. Real coaching is where you ask and ask and ask and ask, and they eventually work out for themselves how to solve the issue that they have. Now, not all coaching is about solving problems, but a great deal of coaching is about solving problems, even if the person you're coaching doesn't at the start realize or understand or acknowledge that they have problems. So that's an idea of what coaching is, and perhaps more importantly, what coaching is not. Coaching is not giving counsel. Coaching is not giving direction and managing. And coaching is not mentoring or giving advice. So, one of the first things to do when you are doing executive coaching, and indeed lots of other sorts of coaching, but we're focusing on executive coaching tonight, is to agree what the coaching need is or the purpose of the coaching is. And again, if you're the leader and you're coaching somebody in your team, you may have a very clear idea of what you want the need or the purpose to be. but it's not up to you. It's up to the person being coached. And we describe the person being coached in using lots of different words, like coachee. But the word that I find is easiest to use is client. I think of the person being coached as my client, even if they are also in my team and they are one of my team members. If I'm coaching them, they're my client, and I have a responsibility to them as I have towards clients. So how do we agree the coaching need? Coaching needs tend to be on to continue again, from hard, observable, outcome focused to soft, subjective, process orientated on the one hand, and to where the person being coached starts off with a lack of understanding or self-understanding to start with, to where they come in with a good deal of self-understanding. Those are the two different continua we're working with. So if somebody has a lack of self-understanding and wants an outcome which is observable or quite hard, they might say, for example, it might be something like saying, I wanted that job, but I don't know why I don't get it. So I want to be coached on why I didn't get promoted into the head of division, or why I didn't get the project alpha lead, or why I didn't get the sales manager lead. I wanted the role. I thought I was good enough for it, but I didn't get it. So there's clearly some lack of self-understanding in me. And I want an observable outcome from this coaching. I want to know why I didn't get that role. Why wasn't I considered right for it? Now, if I go into coaching with self-understanding and I want a hard or observable outcome, it may be that I say, this is about behavioral change. It's not about clarifying. It's about saying, I know what I want and I know what I need to do. So help me process that, help me plan it, help me understand what I need to do, help me to identify the actions that are going to make me make this behavioral change stick, help me identify barriers to it, help me understand if I've got the guts to do it. But that's what I want. I want to make a change to get where I know I want to go. People might want to explore something where there is a lack of self-understanding and the outcome is quite soft and poorly defined. It's more subjective, more process orientated. So I'm not enjoying my work anymore, and I don't really understand why. So I want to explore this. I don't have a hard focused outcome, but I'd like to understand better somehow. Is it an attitude change? Is it because I'm afraid of change? What? I don't know what it is, but I want to try to explore why I'm not enjoying my work. Or it might be that I have self-understanding and I do want quite a hard or observable outcome, which, I'm sorry, I have self-understanding, but the outcome I want is quite soft, it's quite subjective. I know I want more of myself. I can't define it any better than that, and I want to explore it. So when we're coaching individuals, however much we think we know them, however much we think we know where we want to take them, it's really important that they set what they want the coaching to do. Now, we can help them. We can ask them, do you want a really observable outcome, or are you happy for it to be quite subjective and process orientated? Do you come into this really knowing yourself and how you feel and think about things? Do you come into this not being so sure? You can ask questions that help people to understand where they might sit in this kind of a graph, but this is important to identify. Now, I'm going to give you an example of how coaching works by taking you through what we call a content-free coaching experience. You need to do this by making some notes on a piece of paper, on an electronic pad if you've got that, or in your head if you're clever enough to keep things in your head. I can't do this in my head, but you might be clever. I want you to think of an issue or a topic. It can be in work, it can be out of work, that would benefit from having 5 minutes or so of clear thinking. It might be, how am I going to spend Christmas? It might be, how do I help my children decide what they're going to do for A-level? It might be, what kind of new car should we be getting when we change our car? It might be, how do I make my next step up the career ladder? It can be work-related, it can be not work-related. Just try and have something in your head, an issue or a topic that would benefit from having 5 minutes of clear thinking about it. Write that topic down on the top of a piece of paper or on the back of an envelope or on a piece of scrap paper, and then listen to me. I'm going to ask you a series of questions about that topic. Don't write the questions down, write the answers down. So I'm going to ask you questions about the topic, write the answers to the questions down. So I'm going to give you a minute to think about the topic and write the topic on a piece of scrap paper, or run away off camera and get a piece of scrap paper if you haven't got one and something to write with. You're probably wondering when you last had so much fun on a webinar.
I actually have few questions. Of course I do.
You've always got questions.
I always have questions.
You're great, Nika, because you always have in your mind the questions that other people have but won't ask. Can they wait until after we've done this exercise?
Yes, but I think my question is very good for the exercise. It's not just because it's fun. But whenever I'm allowed to ask, I will ask.
You're always allowed to ask, Nika.
Well, I think like massive question is, how am I going to be myself in a work environment? Because I think we all struggle with that, and that's where it's conflicting, because as a leader and as a manager.
Do you mean as a coach, how would you be yourself?
Exactly. Well, that's exactly what I wanted to say.
You won't be yourself. I didn't say you should be yourself. I said you should be authentic and you should be emotionally intelligent.
Correct. And that's
but
what
you won't be yourself. Coaching is not something, it's an artificial thing to do. And you won't be yourself, but you can be authentic.
But I'm sorry to be the devil's advocate. For example, when we talk about authenticity in leadership, and coaching should be a skill to use in your work environment, because we need to empower people. Difference between coaching and mentoring, let's say both, right?
Yes.
In a given case, how are you actually being authentic in that process?
Well, you are coaching authentically. So a coach, for example, doesn't.
Because you're supposed to be indifferent, right? You need to be realistic and as
not indifferent. You're supposed to be detached.
Detached, correct.
So when you're coaching, you're detached. When you're leading, you're not detached. You're involved. You're engaged. So, but being an authentic coach, behaving authentically as a coach, is to be detached. So when you're coaching, you must put aside your desire to be engaged with the person whom you're with, despite the fact that they're in your team, and despite the fact that you know them and you know what their hopes and their fears and their dreams are, despite the fact that you know what their ambitions are, because good coaching requires you to be detached. So to be an authentic coach, you must be detached.
But that will mean that our authenticity in leadership is conditional.
Well,
we
of course,
choose when we want to be authentic.
But being authentic means being true to yourself. And if part of yourself is to be a really good coach, then being true to yourself is to be detached when coaching.
Okay, that answers it. Thank you.
Okay, let me ask you some questions about this issue or this topic that would benefit from having 5 minutes of clear thinking. The first question, what's your long-term goal with this situation or this issue? Write down the answer. Don't tell me. Write down the answer for yourself. What's your long-term goal with this situation or this issue or this topic that you've identified? What's your long-term goal? And when you've decided that and written that down, what do you really want? What's your gut tell you about this? So you've written down the issue or the topic. What does your gut tell you about it? And you're just jotting notes on these things, okay? And now I'm going to ask you, how important is this issue right now? If it's not important right now, what would make it more important right now? So how important is this issue right now? It might be a real burning bridge, or you might say, well, it's not that important right now. If it isn't that important right now, what would or could make it more important right now? And the next thing I'm going to ask you is this. Being really honest with yourself, because nobody's going to see this piece of paper but you, what's really going on in this situation? What's really going on?
Those are fantastic questions.
Thank you. It's my own, you know.
Because on the first bullet, I can, in the second bullet, I can already see that I'm in an internal conflict. And by the fourth question, I'm already resolving it.
There you are. Tell me I'm not good. The next question. What do you control and what don't you control? What do you control and what don't you control? And the final question, not the final question of all, but the final question in this little section is, what might you have to let go of, or what might you have to accept around this issue or this topic? What might you have to let go of, or what might you have to accept around this issue or this topic? And next, are you able to list the options that you have in this situation? Are you able to list the options that you have in this situation? And next question, thinking of your issue or your topic, what advice would you give to a friend who found themselves in the situation that you're in?
This is such a good exercise, Roger.
Thank you.
Those questions are spot on.
And the next question is, regarding this issue or this topic, what do you know that you have to do? Regarding this issue or this topic, what do you know that you have to do? And the next question, thinking about this issue or this topic, what action or what option do you choose to do? So what action or what option do you choose to do? So what are you going to do? And the final question is this. On a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to actually doing that option? On a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to actually doing that option? Now, what you have just gone through is, without you answering the questions to me verbally, you've gone through a coaching process which is called the GROW model. Now, the GROW model is a very, very well-established model of coaching. It's a solution-focused approach where you ask questions around those 4 areas, GROW. And in asking the questions and in asking follow-up questions and in continuing to ask questions, you work through this model, which I'll show you the full model in a moment, in far more detail than I just did. But as Nico was saying, as you go through, if you ask killer questions, you can get some killer answers and help people to work things through. Now, this model, the GROW model, was developed by Sir John Whitmore in the late 1980s and introduced in his book, Coaching for Performance, which was first published in 1992, in which anybody who wants to coach with any degree of seriousness should read. Sir John died in 2017 at the age of 80. The book continues to be reprinted year after year, and the GROW model is being used by literally thousands of coaches around the world. And typically what coaches do is they start by using the GROW model quite tightly, holding it quite tightly, making copious notes around it. And then as they get more and more used to it, it becomes more and more familiar to them, and they use it rather more loosely, rather in the same way that when you learn to drive, you start off by following very assiduously everything that your driving instructor tells you. You then pass your test, barely able to drive, but just about able to pass your test. And 10 years down the road, you're able to roar around the countryside whilst having raging arguments with your spouse in the car and still driving safely and getting from A to B. Well, it's a bit like that with the GROW model. You start off, it feels a bit clunky, but by the time you've used it for a while, it feels quite comfortable. And then it feels like an old glove that you slip on, and it's completely usual, and you use it very competently. So the G stands for goal, setting clear goals for the conversation. The R stands for reality, checking and raising awareness of the situation as it is right now. The O stands for options, finding alternative strategies, solutions, and answers with the client. And the W is the wrap-up, testing commitment and building concrete action plans. So that is what you do. Now, GROW is a fluid model. You can go from G to R and then realize in exploring reality that the goals are completely, utterly out of this world. So you go back to G again. You can go from G to R to O and then realize you need to go back to R, or you need to go back to G, because it all needs to fit together in the end. But ultimately, you need to work your way through the GROW model to get to the point where your client tells you whether they have the commitment to build concrete action plans towards the goal that they may have readjusted, they may have gone back to, they may have fine-tuned, but about which they are very clear. So the goals clarify desired outcomes and inner motivations. So we ask questions around what specifically is it that you want? Is any part of it measurable? How will you know if you've reached this goal? What elements of it are under your control? A dozen other different things. It's very, very easy to find sheets full of questions to go with each of these different elements of the plan. I'm showing you just a very quick selection tonight because this is a taster session rather than anything else. Reality is where we check external facts and internal meaning. So we check the reality of the external world and we ask people what their inner understanding of reality is, because both of those are real and both of those are important. What have you done already to reach this goal? What obstacles or constraints are holding you back? What's really stopping you, which is about internal meaning? What would enable you, which is about internal meaning? The O is about useful questions around options. Options are about internal desires. So we're testing perceptions and assumptions. We're trying to get the client to broaden thinking, to generate alternatives, because it may be, and it often is, that with the reality that exists, particularly the internal reality, although sometimes it's the external reality, the goals are not credible. What could you do as a next step? What else could you do? What else could you do? Really, are you sure? Are you really sure? Is this the way you really want to go? What could be the first step? How have others tackled this in the past? So by constantly checking on the degree of internal desire, by making people test their assumptions and their perceptions, giving them the opportunity to broaden their thinking, giving them the opportunity to generate alternatives to their goals, to generate alternatives to their reality, if that's what they want to do, we're giving them the opportunity to create options. And from there, that's why it is often the case that from options, people go back either to change their reality or to change their goals, because here is where we give them the chance to broaden their thinking and to generate alternatives. Eventually, they come to, so will you? So what will you? So when will you? So are you absolutely sure that you will? Establishing commitment and a determination to get this thing done. What's your own level of commitment? How will you score it on a scale of 1 to 10? And if your commitment score is less than 8, why are we even having this conversation? What are the consequences of not doing it? What are the consequences of doing it? What are the next steps? And when will you take those steps? And people will often falter at this stage and go, well, yeah, and now we talk about it like this. Better to falter at this stage in a coaching session than to blindly go and try and do something and abjectly fail. Now, what I tend to do after the GROW test is I get people to walk me through the head, heart, and guts test. How clear are you about your goal and about your action plan? Have you got your head straight? Or are you actually still in la la land? Have you got your heart strong? How great is your enthusiasm for doing this? Because this is a tough row to hoe. Have you got the guts to do it? So once I've got people through GROW, I will often say to them, right, last thing, head, heart, and guts. And that, because like all apparently simple tools, Grow is extraordinarily deep. Grow and the head, heart and guts test will take you through an awful lot of coaching situations. Now, I want to give you the chance to practice the Grow model. And having practiced it, I will then give you, to finish up our quick little shallow dip into the coaching pool, I'll give you some coaching hints and tips. In this quick chance to practice Grow, of course, it's just a shallow dip into the coaching pool. We understand that. But what I want you to do is I want you to work in threes, and the topic that you're going to be coaching on and being coached on is this. How could you adopt a coaching approach more often in your leadership? How could you adopt a coaching approach more often in your leadership? So in the three, what happens is this. The person who is allocated the coach role first takes the person who's allocated the client role through the Grow model. The third person observes. It'll be quick, but it will give you a feel. So A, the coach, coaches, B, the client, and C, observes. It should take you no more than 10 minutes, 15 minutes maximum to do that. Then B, the coach, coaches, C, the client, and A, observes. And then C, the coach, coaches, A, the client, and B, observes. And at the end of the whole thing, give yourselves just 5 minutes just to give each other a little bit of feedback. And then we'll all come back into the main room here and we'll listen to how it went. Don't overthink this. Just have the Grow model, which Isaac's going to put into the room with you, and just work through it as well as you can. Just get a feel for using it as a coach, get a feel for being coached through it, and the observers, please be gentle, please be compassionate. And I'll see you back here once you've done a little bit of coaching. So welcome back. And I hope you enjoyed that very brief opportunity to explore a little bit about the Grow model, to feel what it feels like, one, to be the coach, and two, to be the client as you go through that process. I know it was very fast, and really, I just wanted you to have the experience. I don't think I'm going to ask you to give me any feedback on it, because you'll still be like processing what it was like. Really, I just want you to take away from that how the Grow model felt to you, how it felt to you to use it as a coach, how it felt to you to use it as a client, and to go away and just think about how valuable that particular coaching tool might be for you. Now, I said I would very quickly talk about coaching hints and tips. We are very short on time, and I know your time is valuable. I don't want to take up too much more of it. Let me just talk to you about the kind of things that we would talk about if and when we have the opportunity to talk to you about how you might develop as a coach. So how do you help somebody to clarify their goal? How do you help people to ask open questions? So there are different types of questions: closed questions, probing questions, open questions. When and how do you use them? And how do open questions help you to improve the quality of your coaching conversations? How do you listen really well? How do you appreciate what you hear? And how do you genuinely listen? One of the biggest issues we have is that most of us listen in order to wait our turn to speak. And we need to listen much more deeply in a coaching context. So we do quite a lot of work around hearing and listening, and listening really well, listening really deeply. Understanding other people's perspectives on things. When we're not coaching, because coaching is quite a foreign thing to do, it's not a conversation, because we are not doing anything other than asking questions. When we're not coaching, we are constantly kind of giving our perspective on something and listening to somebody else's. But if you're only asking questions, you've got to spend a lot of your time really trying to understand the perspectives that you hear in the questions that you ask. Then you've got to be able to help people talk about next steps. How can you encourage that? And then this rather gnomic phrase at the end, coach in the moment. It doesn't matter how many models you've got, it doesn't matter how many different ways you've got of thinking about coaching. In the end, you're there with a client and something is happening in the moment, and you've got to be able to go with that. Sometimes coaching takes very unexpected turns, and sometimes those turns make it really tempting for you to give solutions, or really tempting for you to give advice, or really tempting for you to really sympathize. Oh, you poor thing, that must be so terrible for you. You can't do any of that. When you're coaching, the authentic thing to do is to be a really genuine coach. So that's why the last piece of advice is try to avoid giving advice.